Trauma Therapist Podcast Plus listeners can listen to episodes early and ad-free right now. Become a Plus listener by going to Apple Podcasts, searching for the Trauma Therapist Podcast, and signing up today. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who've experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. All right, Eric, you ready?
Yep.
Okay. All right, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Dr. Eric Maisel. Eric, welcome.
Great to be here.
Appreciate it. So Eric is the author of more than 50 books. His interests include creativity, the creative life, and the profession of creativity coaching, which he founded. Issues of life purpose and meaning, mental health, and critical psychology, also known as critical psychiatry and anti-psychiatry, and parenting in a, quote, mental disorder age. Dr. Maisel's most recent book is called Redesign Your Mind, the Breakthrough Program for Real Cognitive Change. Dr. Maisel writes the Rethinking Mental Health blog for Psychology Today and is a regular contributor to Mad in America, where he founded and edited its parent resources section. Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
I got tired listening to that.
So before we get going here, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
I was born in the Bronx. I grew up in Brooklyn, went to high school in Manhattan to a math and science high school called Stuyvesant. Thought I was a math and science boy. Went to college too young at 16, flunked out by 18, joined the Army in 1965, et cetera, et cetera. Ended up in California. That's where I am now, near San Francisco. And I've been here for a long time now, but you can't take New York out of the New Yorker. So I'm a Brooklyn boy.
Well, as a New Yorker myself, I thoroughly agree. Now, let me just pause a second. Can you lift your screen up so your head's not being... Yeah, perfect. All right. So super interesting. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Stuyvesant, don't they like specialize in math?
Absolutely. I thought I was a math and science boy. I thought I was going to be a physicist or an astronomer. At the same time, I was reading existential fiction and existential literature as a kid, and that was actually more interesting to me than physics and chemistry and all of that. So I didn't know that I was shifting into the existential world as a kid. I just was lost. But by the time I started college, I'd lost interest in science. When I got out of the Army, I got my first degree in that thing you do when you don't know what you're doing. I got a degree in philosophy and started writing books at about the age of 24. And I've been doing that for 50 years or so. That's been my main thing, writing books.
Reading your bio, obviously creativity just jumps out. How did that begin to manifest in you?
Yeah, when I started training, well, of course, I was being a creative person in my 20s. I had a ghostwriting career, was writing fiction. But at some point, we had young kids. I wasn't making enough money. It didn't seem honorable to keep writing. So I retooled and became a California licensed therapist. And as a therapist, I began to notice that artists weren't a particularly served population. I was just curious about who was working with artists, and I wasn't really finding anybody who was. So I decided to work with artists primarily, almost immediately as a therapist, actually with artist couples, which is about as hard a bit of work as you can do, having two artists in the room together. But it was quite rewarding, except I stopped believing in the pseudo-medical model of therapy. So I had to make a shift to what I first called creativity consulting and then creativity coaching. And that's what I've been doing for the last many, many years, 35 years, working as a creativity coach with creative performing artists.
This is really resonating with me because I started out as a musician. I went to what was Philadelphia College of Art at the time for a year, dropped out, played more music, and have been creative all my life. And kind of did the opposite to I kind of moved out of that and I've been struggling.
Yep.
And part of me wants to say help, but
Yeah, let's
what,
do a coaching session. Absolutely.
oh my God,
Let's get the band together.
it's been so,
Mhm.
let me rephrase my question here. What do you find? So you hear what I just said, and I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot of people come to you and what are you finding? What are you hearing from people who are struggling in this way?
Lots of different things. One is getting the work done. That's one of the primary problems that creative folks come in to me to chat about, that they're not getting their writing done or their rehearsing done or this or that. So it's just getting the work done is probably the number one issue. Making money from it, the career issues, there's so much competition and so much difficulty there. The special sadness, I don't want to use the depression word, but the special sadness, the existential despair that comes with our life, wondering if what we're doing really matters, having meaning leak out of the enterprise, wondering if the world needs another song or another photograph or another poem. We kind of understand why the world needs bread or medicine, but another poem, does it really need it? So there's that existential questions about mattering. Special anxiety issues. Most creative folks don't understand the extent to which they've been silenced by anxiety, just tendrils of anxiety. I don't mean big panic attack stuff, but just the anxiety that comes with, for instance, choosing. The creative process is one choice after another. Put the red here, put the blue there. One choice after another, and choosing provokes anxiety. So creative folks don't quite realize that they need special anxiety management skills in order to persist in their life. So those are some of the sorts of things that folks come to me with. There are all kinds of other issues, choosing among loves, showing up each day, dealing in relationship ways with the person who's maybe is making the money in the household and not feeling like a parasite or not feeling like you're not contributing to the household income. A zillion issues that, are all nameable. It's not really mysterious. They just
Hmm.
need to be teased apart, and together they make the creative life.
Well, let's, excuse me, if we could, um, can you give us kind of a case? How do you deal with this? Someone walks in, maybe you have someone in mind right now. How, how do you, and again, with the understanding that each person is different, each situation is different,
Yeah.
but
I have lots of talking points, so I think I can begin to address the question you're asking. One is I invite a pair of paradigm shifts to all clients. One is the movement from the idea that life has one purpose to the idea of life purposes, of life purpose choosing. It sounds simple, but it's a big shift when a creative person realizes that maybe many things are important to her. Creativity is one of them, but family, relationships, activism, career, service, many other things may be important. So it kind of puts creativity in perspective for them. So they don't
mhm.
have to feel like they're putting all of their eggs in one basket. So they feel like they have a life. So that one shift from the idea of there's only one purpose to life to the idea of multiple life purposes matters.
Why does that help? That particular paradigm shift, or
Because
how does it help?
I think it takes a bit of the importance or investment out of creativity. There's this dance of attachment and detachment that every creative person has to do. You invest in it, you attach to, let's say, the symphony you're writing. Let's just pick something. You attach to the symphony you're writing, but then, of course, you have to let it go when you put it out into the world. You have to let the world decide whether it's wanted and all of that. And so that kind of investing can make a person anxious and also sad if nothing's happening for the work or to the work.
Hmm.
So this gives them other things to feel good about or other things to be doing, to say it simply, other things to be doing that also count. I think to use a cliche, it's a more balanced life to imagine that many things are important to you than to put all of your eggs in the creativity basket. That just overburdens that basket.
Hmm. And if you're not being quote unquote creative at that time,
Then why are you even alive?
right,
You know,
right.
so that's right. Folks need to understand that there are other things. They could be enjoying that hour in the park with their kids rather than pining for the novel they're not writing at that moment. They could be enjoying life in other ways and keeping the existential underpinning of their life going by virtue of this shift in thinking to many things being important. Similarly, there's a shift from seeking meaning, which is a 2,000-year-old metaphor that everybody's kind of stuck with. The meaning's out there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know the famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl's book, the idea that got to go find it. So I sell the paradigm shift to the idea of making meaning. Rather than go looking for meaning, my idea is that meaning is actually just a feeling. We each have our subjective psychological experiences, and some feel meaningful and some don't. And that's all it is. And when you get that idea that it's just a feeling, then it makes sense that it will come and go. Meaning comes and goes.
Mm-hmm.
This is really helpful to creative people who maybe, let's say they spend 300 days writing a novel, and 263 of those days, it doesn't feel very meaningful to be sitting there because the novel's sloggy and not working and grumpy and all of that. When they get this idea, there's no reason why it should feel meaningful. There's no reason why it should feel meaningful. Then they can relax and not be so hungry for meaning. Once you get the idea that my analogy is joy. You would not expect every moment of your life to be joyful. That would be a little strange to expect that. But if you begin to understand that joy comes and goes, and you can sort of coax it into existence, you can try things that might bring you more joy. Meaning is just like that. You can try things that will bring you more meaning. And I invite clients to try things that will bring them more meaning, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if the meaning doesn't come. As long as you're living your life purposes, then you're living life as you should.
There's so many cliches around this topic of the artist struggling, and for me, I found myself. I'm relating a lot to what you're saying. I found myself devaluing my creativity and my love of creativity, and feeling like I needed to satisfy my father and get into more business stuff. And that's
why that first year of college is actually the last year of high school, and the first year of college is so hard on my students, because all along parents have been supporting their creativity. They go to the concerts, they put their little drawings up on the refrigerator, all that. Suddenly the conversation happens in the senior year of high school where the kid says, I want to go to art school. And the parents say, what are you talking about? We're not paying for that. That's absolutely not okay. So this shift happens right around the junior and senior year of high school. It's very demoralizing and very disruptive. And then when you have to pick your major in college, that's why that first year of college, we use the cliche of adjustment disorder, why so many kids have an adjustment disorder in that year, but they're really struggling to make sense of this conflict that you just described. Some go for the art direction and have fights with their family and all of that. Others please their parents and take up accounting, or maybe take up graphic art rather than fine art, to make this sort of compromise somewhere 46% in the middle of it all somehow.
Right.
This is what goes on. And that's why college is so hard. It may be easier at MIT for a math student, but they know they're doing math. Mm-hmm. But for a humanities student, for an art student, I think college is really very hard, because they're struggling with this precise conflict of, do I get to manifest my creativity, or should I do something sensible?
And it truly is, and can become, for a lot of us, from an existential crisis, because you feel like you're not being who you are, right? I mean, absolutely. You feel like you're not valuing who you are. There's a constant questioning about your worth, and the insidiousness can be so subconscious and demoralizing.
Right.
How did you get to a point where you felt you could address this and work with people in this context?
Well, of course, I had the lived experience of many, many years of living a creative life. I also loved reading interview books with artists. Well, there are all kinds of interesting interview books out there. I found them better than sort of theoretical books about creativity. I don't find theoretical books about creativity that rich. but interviews with actual working artists about what there's an interesting book called Musings from Chaos and Ash, very strange title, but it's interviews with visual artists who recently have received an HIV
Mm.
positive diagnosis
Oh,
and
wow.
how that changes their lives, how that changes the subject matter of their paintings even, etc. So this is what informed me is really being interested in the real lives of artists. And so doing it now for 30 or 40 years, kind of seen everything in that world.
What do you say to people who just are struggling with uh, not feeling as though their creativity matters? I mean, it feels like such an existential question to me. And then let's segue to get into your course.
Sure. I have lots of different sorts of things to say. One is I invite them to remember what it felt like at the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to sit in the corner of a room reading a book, and just that the way they were in love with that experience. Nobody had to tell them to love that book or love that song or love that movie. So I'm trying to reconnect them to love and all the synonyms of love: curiosity, enthusiasm, passion, all of those words, trying to reconnect them to that. Then I share with them the idea of what the avant-garde artists of the turn of the 20th century would say, namely that they were looking for an audience of one, that if they could move one other person, that was valuable to them. Now, of course, they really wanted an audience of billions. They were narcissists like we know they were, but still they used that phrase to communicate to themselves, to keep their own passion afloat for their work while they were doing cubism and what have you. So that resonates for my clients, the idea that they don't have to worry about doing this thing which feels so hard, getting a huge audience. Maybe if they just move one other person, that would be sufficient. So there are so many different kinds of talking points, but
Mm-hmm.
they swirl around existential support, them reminding themselves, or maybe saying for the first time, that they and their efforts really matter. They have to decide to don that mantle of feeling like their efforts matter and finding that place of love again. And then tactics, the main tactic being to be with the work every single day. What I say to them, and they realize this is true, they know that if they miss 3 or 4 days of practicing or writing or painting, months go by. They
Yeah.
just vanish because as soon as we're out of touch with that work, the rest of life just infiltrates that time. And so that's not a good thing to lose months and years. So on the tactical level, we talk about daily practice. I talk about the idea of morning practice so that you can receive the benefits of sleep thinking, which is a particular idea, the way we think while we sleep and how that can increase our creativity by making use of that. So there's the existential stuff, but then there's just the tactical stuff of
Mm-hmm.
when to create, how often to create, what kind of commitment you want to make with me, the coach. Do you want to check in with me every day? I'm happy to do that. I don't mind check-ins. What's the amount of time you want to try for? Most new clients will say, I want to spend 20 minutes on X on my novel. So they don't want to disappoint themselves again by making too big a promise. So the promise has to be calibrated. So
Mm-hmm.
these are all the sort of the tactics and techniques one learns over time in working with creative and performing artists.
So let's talk about your course, your workshop. Lay it out for us. What's it called, first off?
Yeah, there's a big new thing coming that I'm running called an Existential Wellness Coach Certificate Program, which is a mouthful. Happens in the spring of this year, and it's a program that I'm running in conjunction with an organization called Noble Manhattan Coaching out of the UK.
Oh,
And it trains you to become an existential wellness coach, which is a new creature under the sun. There are existential coaches already, and there are wellness coaches already. I'm trying to marry those two ideas. It's not an existential coach typically talks about certain kinds of ideas like we've been talking about life purpose and meaning and those sorts of things. And a wellness coach typically talks about what wellness looks like to that coach, whether it's focusing on health or some other aspect of wellness, emotional wellness. I'm trying to combine those two ideas and produce a new helper who can find the different pillars of wellness in a person's life, the existential pillars, the psychological pillars, the physical pillars, all of that, and support a person in every aspect of their life. So I think it's an interesting program. I'm running a dozen free existential wellness coach webinars during the spring. So if folks are interested in that, they can just visit my website, ericmaisel.com, and learn about that. There are a lot of free offerings, so that's a good way to be introduced to this idea.
Okay. And who is this workshop course for?
It's for general coaches who have a general practice, general life coaches who want this niche or this
Hmm.
extra understanding. And it's also for folks, it can be for therapists, existential therapists, or just any therapist who's interested in either adding coaching to their life or moving from the medical model of therapy to the helping model of coaching, or someone who's in the arts or someplace where they need an extra revenue stream. You know the creative performing artists have to cobble an income together from various sources. Typically, their art is not making them enough money. So this can be the sort of thing that an artist might do as an addition to their artwork, is to become this kind of coach and help people with their existential issues.
The topic of social media, I think, is a big one. I think it can obviously be beneficial and help to highlight people's art, but I feel it also can be a hindrance for a lot of us. What are your thoughts on this?
Exactly what you just said, that both are true. The way I frame it to creative and performing artist clients is the following way. The rule is that artists won't make it. That's the rule. That's just the fact of the matter. That's the fact of the matter. So that means you, my client, you're going to have to prove the exception. This is my language. You're going to have to prove the exception. You don't want to be the rule here, someone who doesn't make it. You're going to have to prove the exception if you intend to make it. And that means you have to do some exceptional things. And what does that mean to you? For one person, that might mean I'm really going to pour myself into Instagram more than the next person and get 3 million followers and what have you. For another person, it may be completely staying away from social media and doing something else. So I invite clients to think for themselves what this phrase, proving the exception, is going to mean to them. And I keep subtly hammering this idea across that they can't just do what other artists are doing because other artists are not making it. They have to do
Hmm.
something a little different, a little savvier, a little more strategic, maybe a little more exhausting. Maybe
Hmm.
they want to exhaust themselves in the service of their art rather than standing behind this word balance, which is an interesting word, which can mean I'm not going to do too much,
Hmm.
etc. So I don't have a short answer about social media. It has to be, the client's direction as to what they think about it. But what I do want to strongly suggest to them is they have to figure some of these things out for themselves and then throw themselves into it.
As you speak, Eric, part of me is thinking at some point one has to just shut up and get to work, right? You've got to, if you feel
Yes.
you're an artist, if you feel you're creative, you've got to do the work. You can't just too much thinking oftentimes goes into this process.
Yeah, that's where the book that you mentioned at the outset that's come out recently, Redesign Your Mind, they need to be thinking thoughts that serve them in order to do the thing you just said, to show up. They need some anxiety management techniques in order to do the things you just said. They need often a better understanding of how addiction works in the creative personality and why they have to be watchful for their risk factors and their triggers and what have you. There are many things to think about, but what you said is the truth. The bottom line is that all of that notwithstanding, they have to show up in a daily way. And I really mean a daily way, because as I said to you a moment ago, it can't be every fourth day or every seventh day. It doesn't work. Tchaikovsky has a quote I like, which is, I'm inspired every fifth day, but I only get that fifth day if I show up the other four.
Mm.
And so I believe in inspiration, but I don't believe you can wait on it. We do have to show up to the work, and then we get the fruits of that showing up in the form of inspiration.
Well, you seem to be someone who's really garnered and taken from a lot of what you teach. I mean, you're creative, you've written crazy amount of books, and you're also out there helping other people.
Yeah.
Was this a challenge for you to create a business around this? How did you come
Well,
about it?
the first challenge, this will sound funny perhaps, the first challenge was to care about other people at all. I think in my 20s, I was that typical cafe going, late night, arrogant, narcissistic, grandiose guy. I was that guy. Um, the first sort of introductory course, therapy course, the course you took before you actually started the program was a simple listening course, listening skills, like how to listen to another person or how to find the willingness to listen to another person. That was life-changing for me because I'm not sure I'd ever listen to anybody else except to, fight about some opinion or something or to argue. But to listen in the sense in which a therapist listens, that was new to me and that was life-changing. So
Hmm.
that was a big deal transformation. But I'd always wanted to help. I'd never thought that creativity for its own sake was what matters. I was born right after World War II, 1947. The idea of being a resistance fighter was in the air still, and something about that infiltrated my being, that I was going to resist and that I was going to be helpful in the same way that a resistance fighter is helpful to his society or his culture. And so I've had that thing going all of this time, this helping part, along with the creativity part. So that wasn't new to me. The new part was caring about other people. That was new to me. Probably having children had something to do with that too, where you have objects of affection, kids to love. Those were transformative things. Kids and that listening course, those two things together.
Awesome. All right, Eric. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
They can drop me an email to ericmaisel@hotmail.com, and that's EricMaisel @hotmail, or my site, ericmaisel.com. Love to have people visit.
Okay, we'll have those linked up. Also have the link for your new course coming up too. Eric, awesome talking to you, man. Really inspiring. Appreciate you taking the time.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, take care.